Okay, we have some online audience and some audience here. Benjamin, great seeing you here, and finally we have some local material to discuss, and we're usually kind of going as global as we could, overstretching ourselves, but this time we're focusing on the local conditions, which is a great and very refreshing experience. So Benjamin has been working on what he's calling, ironically, the beauty of oil for quite a while. He created a project, and there is a really beautiful site. You could Google it. It's called The Beauty of Oil. Lots of interesting stuff there. And Benjamin teaches both in the University of Halle, right, and the Technical University of Berlin.
No, Halle is my colleague, Alexander.
Oh, that's...
I'm at Technical University in Berlin and at the Max Planck Institute, but not teaching. So
Max Planck Institute in Halle?
In Jena.
In Jena, yeah.
This was the...
Yeah, two neighboring places. Yeah. Okay, got it. So, we're looking forward to hearing this talk and possibly to some kind of close collaboration with you and your colleagues.
Yeah, we thought about an excursion, maybe. I mean, let's see how everything develops. Thank you very much for joining this very intimate session here. I'm very happy to contribute to your lecture series. I show you just what will the parts of the talk. First, I will introduce a little bit my approach. Then most of the talk will deal here really with the local case, the Vienna Basin, and I prepared a series of aspects which you can see here. But I don't tell you the story just because of the story, but to use this as a showcase how to connect the local spheres and the planetary spheres in the Anthropocene. And that's why I understand this here as an interesting process landscape. And I'll tell you what I understand by a process landscape. So atlas making, really connecting, going really into local situations and reading the Anthropocene from local conditions. This is something I think is really important. And then geoanthropology is the term that we coined for this Vienna Institute to really go into all human activities and to not presuppose a so-called anthropos in the Anthropocene, but to read the actions of this anthropos in local scenarios. So connecting planetary processes with local geographies, histories, and politics, and dealing with the stories on the ground, and then to read out what type of human-Earth interactions are present at a certain historic scenario. And as a philosopher of history and culture, the very interesting thing with the Anthropocene is that it connects various categories. It connects, of course, the fossil sphere with the modern sphere. It connects micro with macro systems. So in my case, I work a lot with chemists. So, and the chemistry, the molecular technology is very important for planetary Earth systemic new cycles. So small, big, nature, culture, fossil, modern, also qualitative categories like beauty and horror. Also, we need to deal with emancipation and totalitarianism, maybe in the same place, and the dynamics go through individuals and also through societies. So my approach in Anthropocene research, some programmatic remarks here. I work a lot, as said, with chemistry. So one of my main cases is industrial chemistry as a key factor of petromodernity. A lot of the great acceleration that we are dealing with in the Anthropocene would not have been possible without the chemical acceleration of processes in refineries, chemical plants and so on. And it is important to connect there the microspheres of real molecules with the mesospheres of apparatuses, with the macrosphere of world history, and of course, geohistory. In the last years, I contributed a lot to activities of Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin, which was quite a leading actor in all these Anthropocene discourses. And Alexander mentioned already this project Beauty of Oil, which I've founded with my colleague Alexander Klose, with whom I also published all these books, and with whom I also contributed to HKW and to this very big exhibition in Wolfsburg, which has here the catalog. Please around the books. Around. So this is actually atlas making. This looks into the broader context, and we always think the global from the local. This is here the chapter on Louisiana, on northern Germany, and on Baku. Nicely, we also have a Russian version of our atlas, and this is the Baku chapter in the Russian version. And atlas making, of course, has a lot of interesting connections to other work. I only want to quote this Petrochemical America atlas made by Richard Meisrad, Kate Orff. And now we already jump into the Vienna Basin. Has any one of you ever heard about oil and gas in the Vienna Basin? Maybe not so many people. It is even among Austrians and among people in Vienna.
Gasometers.
Yeah, but it's a not so well known story. But we are actually very close here to really interesting oil fields. So this is here in the city of Vienna. Those are online just need to look at it a little bit closer. And then we have just to the east of Vienna, we have really a very large oil field, and then a little bit to the north, we have also quite interesting oil fields. And I will tell you in this talk about the various histories and connections these oil fields do play a role in. And I worked a lot on this local history in the project that we called Rohstoffgeschichte, which is something like a history of a raw material, but also history as a raw material for a debate. And for some years, we just went through the villages because the official documentation was very, very low level. So there are no big archives in the companies. There is very big scientific institutions around with whom we also collaborated. But we really needed to go to the people and collect their photographs actually. And so we really put a lot of almost 6,000, no, more, maybe something like 8,000 data sets we put into the archives of the Geological Survey of Austria. We also created here this interface for the Technical Museum of Vienna. And so this is quite a huge data set, and most of the pictures I show you are from these collections. So oil and gas, of course, is a very important resource. It's not so unusual to find just oil and gas in the landscape. We have here a map of very small leakages of oil and gas in the Alps, in Switzerland and in Austria, and you see it's almost everywhere you have natural small sources of oil and gas. But what we are talking now is the very big oil fields. These are the oil fields of Austria. Some are in Upper Austria, and the really important ones are here in the so-called Vienna Basin. Vienna Basin is this area here where the Alps just go down and the Carpathian Mountains are going up. And interestingly, there is quite a special geological structure. We will see about this in just some minutes. This map here is from the Geological Survey of Austria. Every year they have this resource report, and there you also have the numbers. And you see the maximum of production was in the 50s with 3.5 million tons produced here in the area. And it actually was quite an important source. I mean, it was for some years it was 100% of Austrian oil consumption. Last years it was always something like 10%. So not nothing, but not too much. But actually, the resource is, in a political and cultural sense, a very interesting substance to follow. So here again we have the oil fields, about which we are talking. But first, I need a small prelude, because the Austrian oil industry actually has its roots not here in the Vienna Basin, but in what is now Ukraine, but what belonged in the 19th century and until the First World War to Habsburg Empire. And here we have, in this region here to the north, in the north of the Carpathian Mountains, we have really very old famous oil fields. And this gentleman here is Ignacy Łukasiewicz, who was the inventor of this petroleum lamp. And this was really quite an innovation in the 19th century. And here we have a small production numbers with about 12 million tons produced in Russia, mainly in the Baku region, 10 million tons produced in the United States, and on third place in the world, Habsburg Galicia. So it was not so big, but it was a quite interesting area. So, and nicely, when the Americans celebrated 100 years of petroleum industry in 1959 with this petroleum lamp, 1959 and 1859, the petroleum lamp in Austria already was shining. So the invention was there before the Americans called it with their Titusville invention. So actually, this story goes back into very deep in time. It's some kind of a very small scale industry, just because it's very shallow oil that just comes up to the surface, and with the special forms. Also something. It's I don't know the exact term now, but it's in German it's called Erdwachs. So it's something like a wax structure, which was used for pharmaceuticals and also chemistry.
Tar.
No, it's not tar. It looks a little bit different. Maybe I can show you a picture, but I didn't put it into the thing. Here we see these Galician oil fields. It really looks like Pennsylvania, but it was a very small scale units, because the structure of the agriculture property there was that the fields were very small, and so it was a mess to produce oil there. But in the First World War, these areas really were called, like in this German postcard, the Speisekammer der U-Boote. So what is Speisekammer in English? It's the where you store all your food.
Menu, no?
Menu,
no?
No, not Speisekarte. So in old houses you have what?
Refrigerator.
So it's like a cellar, like
Yes.
a storage.
Something like the food storage for the submarines. But so it's quite an interesting
Pantry.
Yeah, and so this was really the most important oil resources for Germany and Austria in the First World War, and of course it was not enough to for winning the war, but already by then this area, and this is important for Anthropocene thinking, this was not a local industry there. It attracted a lot of people from Canada, for example. So Canadians were among the first drillers, and these people went all over the world and also came to Galicia, built tennis courts there, made a lot of cool business. And we will follow in some of the next stories also a Canadian family that ended up here in Vienna. So already a big international business. This is a very interesting story by Jérôme Sigal, Vienna-based French historian of science who followed the traces of his Jewish family who were very rich in the Galician oil industry. Then, of course, they lost everything here in the Nazi era. Luckily, most of the family survived in France, and he then writes this bottom-up family story about Galician oil in this book here in the middle, Wie ein roter Faden. It's the story of his family. I also recommend Oil Empire by Alison Frank. It's a quite famous book, and interestingly, the story goes on, and even in the post Second World War years, the gas fields in Galicia still were in place and actually heated Minsk, Kiev, and Moscow for quite some years before the Siberian gas was tapped. So it's an interesting story. But here it's on the prelude. We now switch into the Vienna Basin. Pioneers of this industry started in the 1910s. In the right angle, we see a small peasant called Jan Medlin, who discovered on his ground a small natural gas field in what is now Slovakia. Then the thing exploded, and the authorities then knew, well, there must be oil also in the Vienna Basin because of this natural gas explosion. And then during the First World War, they already started. Here we have a picture of some Turkish engineers here in the north of Lower Austria, who found some traces, but not too much. Here we see a guy. He's called I don't know his prename, but his surname is Musil, not connected to the writer, and he uses this strange thing where you can find it's a I don't know what it's called in English. You can find water with some wooden branches, and these guys also thought that it would be possible to find oil with that. So these were the very rough pioneer years, but also with very interesting insight into the geological structures. This is material from one of the heroes of these early years, Karl Friedl. This is actually glass diapositive, which I found at a OMV wardrobe that they wanted to put just into the trash, but I was there and could take home all these quite interesting historic materials. Knowledge about the geological area here flourished a lot with more and more drillings, which I will come back in some minutes. This is also wooden derricks, and now here we see in early 1930s the first oil is really produced here in the area at Neusiedl in the north of of what we call now the district of Gensendorf, but it's still these wooden derricks and very small scale industry. Big industry was a little bit prevented from this area because the companies that drilled there also had connections to Romania, and so they didn't like concurrence for their Romanian oil fields, so they kept the oil in the ground. People who didn't keep the oil in the ground were the Nazis, of course. In 1938, when they came to Austria, they already knew that there was oil, and it was actually the biggest oil area within the borders of so-called Greater Germany. So then the legislative structure was completely changed. They invented something like a petroleum law that allowed German companies to exclusively drill here, and so they really tried to exploit the area a lot. Of course, the German approach in the war industry was normally to produce not petroleum, but artificial oil from coal. This is these very famous chemical technologies of putting together coal and hydrogen to produce liquid gasoline, and of course they tried to use the oil they had to conquer other oil fields. This is interestingly, I think this picture must be of something in the south of Russia. What do you think, Alexander? Because I think this is the typical Soviet drilling structure. Actually, I found this picture at a drawer in Zistersdorf at a company, and
It could be either Baku or Grozny.
I also think it's Grozny.
It could be Grozny, but
yes. I mean, I showed this to some tank experts, and but also showed it to everyone. That people normally, when you show this to historians of Austrian oil, they think it's here, but it cannot be, because this is by no ways an Austrian derrick construction. It's for sure a Soviet construction. So, but I would really be happy to once learn more about where this photo would come from. But actually, must have come through an Austrian oil engineer from this particular company in Zistersdorf who cropped the picture there, maybe in southern Russia or Ukraine. Maybe
No, in Ukraine it could be only Galicia still. There was no other oil.
Yeah, but I think it's more hilly there. I don't know. I think, but this is
Galicia was under Polish control.
yeah.
Was not
Yeah, but
Soviet.
they would not have these Soviet derricks.
Yeah. So
It's an open question.
Yeah.
So the Nazi approach to oil, of course, is very numerous. We have here in our atlas also a piece about Eichmann, who made his first steps in also for a small Vienna-based oil company. But what is now the main story here in this Vienna Basin Nazi oil is, I will tell you this story through the looking glass of a family history. We have here the inauguration, let's say, of the oil drilling St. Ulrich I at Neusiedl, and this is part of a strangely of a colored 16 millimeters film, which I found also among former workers of the Van Sickel company. And Van Sickel is one of the descendants of a Canadian Huguenot Scottish oil family. We see him here, and he actually drilled this well there. He was British citizen and oilman, but was forced to give up this particular claim and then drilled this well for a German company. And here on the bottom we see Seyss Inquart, who was something like a Reichsstatthalter, so the Nazi authority here. So this is really quite a finding that we did in this Rohstoffgeschichte, that we really found this color 16 millimeters film. Nobody had this film. So the story of Van Sickel is this. It's an old oil family. Here on the right we see his father in Romania. On the left we see the aristocratic family with Serena, Bill, and Keith. Richard Keith is the boy on the top right. And this young man then in the 1930s came here to Austria and got some claims, but then was forced drill this well, and shortly after the well was opened, he himself went to join the British Army, so to fight against the oil that he just drilled for the Nazi Empire. So quite an interesting personal story. He went to Northern Africa, also to Tehran, and his company was still active here in some kind of a strange double authority. It was one of his secretaries. No, one of his. He stupidly gave authority to two people, to his lover. She was called Friede Kraser, and to one of his workers, and this then made the post-war restructuring of the company quite difficult, because this lover Friede Kraser claimed property, and so his family was left out of the will, and so on and so on. So quite a melodramatic story. But he could then come back to Vienna, and he's also mentioned in the Staatsvertrag. And so we have here big world history through the eyes of a small family archive. And actually, James van Sickle, his son, was also a sponsor of our book, and a very nice gentleman. Unfortunately, he died last year. So, but the story goes on. In 1945, Soviets take over these oil fields here. Here we see a photograph, Soviet and Austrian soldiers in the oil field from April 1945. The whole area there is under Soviet control. We have here a nice map with Austrian villages in Cyrillic, with Cyrillic names. Here we have a very nice Cyrillic writing of a small village called Maustrenk. Then we have here Weiselberg, which is quite an interesting oil field. Here we have the Rack field, and here Van Sickle. The Soviet history is quite well documented in interesting books, Die Sowjetische Mineralölverwaltung in Austria, by a historian called Walter Eber. If you're interested, it's a really very good book, and it's also documented in a book that didn't really go in, that wasn't really for sale, but it was made in the OMV company with a lot of interesting historic material. So interestingly, at this period, we have this Central European situation here, with between East and West, North and South, then at the borderline of Eastern and Western petro-modernities, and the oil from here then for 10 years just goes into the Soviet spheres. The oil is refined at the Leuna refinery in Eastern Germany. But then in the end of the 40s, the biggest Austrian oil field at Matzen is discovered by Soviet and Austrian geologists. And interestingly, this oil field somehow postponed, the finding of this oil field somehow postponed the so-called Staatsvertrag from 1955, because the Soviets wanted to get more oil from that field, and so somehow disturbed the negotiations for Austrian independence again. Technology was in a way very brutal. They had these caterpillars and just went through all the agricultural fields. We have what here we have a picture on the left from Austria in the 50s. Almost the same technology is then still used in China in the 70s. This is a snapshot of Joris Eben's famous documentary about Chinese modernization. And I find it interesting that so China and Austria somehow belong to the same caterpillar technological history there. It was in a way very brutal, but it was also in a way very innovative, because at one point here at Zwerndorf there was a big gas leakage for months. Gas just couldn't be, the gas field couldn't be stopped, and then Soviet technology helped to by horizontal drilling to somehow to contain this field. And this was actually the first site where horizontal drilling, which was very innovative by that time, was used in Central Europe, and then by Austrian technology also found its way to the Western Syria. So it was not only brutal, but also quite innovative. These years were some famous catastrophes took place, big explosions with quite big craters. There with month-long fires in the just the vicinity of Vienna. But interesting, what we found in the local memory was that these craters very quickly were used by local youth as bathing ponds, and so it's quite. They were then calling this Little Adria. So very pragmatic way how to deal with an ecological catastrophe. Next chapter is then after the independence, a chapter I called Social Democratic Catholic Patrimodernity. Interestingly, these areas were, or the whole company, OMV, then took over the Soviet property, and as Austria itself, this company needed by law to be something like neutral between the blocks. So Shell or BP or so had no right to buy these oil fields. It needed to be something like a non-Western, non-Eastern thing in the middle, and this is the secret then behind this state-owned company OMV, which was very much balanced between Social Democrat and Catholic, Black, ÖVP people, so a state-owned and very, very interesting Austrian connection. We have here a local St. Barbara Catholic service here with this van in the middle. And interestingly, I don't think we have other cases of a truly Catholic patrimodernity than here in these villages. Maybe in Poland, but I don't know. So the connection between Vienna here, symbolized by the Stephansdom, and these derricks there is quite strong in the 50s and 60s. This is in a former OMV building, which is now demolished. And of course, for the area, this was really something like the golden age, because they got very rich, and since this was state-owned, there was something like a mini OPEC. The villages somehow shared the tax revenue of the what they made with the oil. So something like a connection of these villages just made clear that nothing is lost from the tax income. Here we have in the middle Margarete Ottillinger, one of the famous ladies of Austrian oil history. She was actually deported to Gulag in I think 1946, and then came back to become the head of OMV. And she was also a very Catholic woman, close to Cardinal König, and he also was something like a consultant for him for his Eastern European policy. And so we have quite interesting personal stories and connections between economic and political and cultural history. There is also a book about this woman by Stefan Karner, who's one of the stars of Austrian history. So this is one of my favorite pieces of Austrian Catholic petro-modernity. It's the Easter candle at this church at St. Leonhard, which was actually made by apprentices of OMV in the church, and it's really a very strange piece of art to remember the resurrection of Christ by a tool that made resurrect oil from the underground. Just a few words about what this industry also meant for geology in this field, so for the sciences of geology. There was a lot of drilling, several thousands of drillings. So this area is really very, very well understood into a very deep layers. I already showed you on the left the picture from one of the books of Karl Friedl. With every new drilling, new insight was gained into this structure between the Alps and the Carpathian Mountains. And then in the 1980s, they really drilled some record drillings down to 8,500 meters of depth. So this was really something like a record-setting drillings to get into what they called the so-called third floor. So normally all the oil fields were comparatively shallow, so something like between 1,000 and 3,000 meters of depth. But they thought there would be something below. And since the oil price was so high because of the Iranian Revolution around 1980, it was possible to drill with enormous costs down to 7,000 meters and 8,000 meters. And interestingly, well, they found some gas down there, but the well somehow collapsed, and the next drilling with 8,000 meters didn't find anything. And it took until the recent years that they actually understood that this structure there below was simply shale gas. So there would be enormous amounts of shale gas down there. But thanks to this record-setting drilling, which was in economic categories, it was a failure, but in scientific categories, it was, of course, very interesting to go that deep and to understand the geological structure between the Alps and the Carpathian Mountains that good. And actually, there is an 8,000 meter deep fault situation here, and this is also responsible for earthquakes here. And I don't know how long you live here in the area, but I would say every 5 years we have really earthquakes here in the area, and you really feel them. And it really is not responsible for the oil fields, but it's responsible for the structure where the oil fields are. So here we have again these faults and the oil fields, and of course this very vast knowledge now about the underground construction here. This is an interesting document. This is the amphitheater at Carnuntum. So a very interesting connection between let's say archaeological time frames. So this is something like the oldest structure that we have here in the area, and normally this would be completely symmetric and a completely regular ellipse, but it isn't, and it is not because of this fault situation that over the last 2,000 years somehow distorted this area. And I got this picture by an oil geologist who exactly explained how the Earth moves here by this Roman structure. And I think it's an interesting way. When in the Anthropocene we try to connect timescales of human history and geohistory, this is really something in the middle. Just as a small epilogue to this story, of course, the oil fields here are interesting in a local way, but we also have Austria as something like a petroleum hub, in particular for natural gas. And as we all know, this history is very problematic. And it was already from the very beginning a very problematic and a very ambivalent story, because the success story, of course, of importing Soviet oil and gas via the big hub at Baumgarten next to the Slovakian border. This just started not many months after the brutal fall of Prague Spring. So the connection that we still have in these days, that Austrian policy has a strange connection to the Soviet oil, already started in the very beginning. And of course, the layers of this history are some are well known, some are very, very strange. We have here the famous scene with the former Austrian foreign minister who invited Putin to her private wedding. Then we have also interesting, I think, for something like a cultural history and local anthropology of Lower Austria, we have the very strange connection of OMV sponsoring local youth clubs, football clubs in St. Petersburg, but also Lukoil sponsoring village football club here at Mariazell. So this is really, I mean, how strange can connection get? The story here in the area is not yet closed. So the oil fields are still somehow active. And just some years ago, as already said, they understood that this third floor oil was shale oil and gas, and so it would be possible to still go into quite some rich reservoirs under circumstances now. From an ecological perspective, of course, this has very much criticism against. But of course, nobody knows how geopolitics change in the next years and how these reservoirs there will be treated in the near future. So I am in my third chapter. What types of human-Earth interaction do we have in these local stories? So what planetary questions do we have here, and what, with the perspective of geoanthropology, what, let's say, layers of history can we see here? Of course, we have political history, but we also have very small-scale cultural histories here, and it's interesting how the small-scale processes on the ground are connected to this strategic resource. So, what categories are here, and what type of anthropos would we see if we would try to decipher the Anthropocene from the Austrian field? So back, what big questions do we see? What planetary connections can we see here? And what I think is really interesting is that we have on one spot very different experiences with petromodernity, and also with what this resource, into what political systems this resource is put. So we have experiences from the center, of course, of geopolitical power. So it was an empire. It was the Austrian Empire that discovered these things there in Galicia. But then the next steps, it was somehow at the periphery of the Nazi empire, and then, of course, at the even more so at the peripheries of the Soviet spheres. And so we have different experiences of somehow being the colonizer and also being colonized here. And I think this is interesting for an Anthropocene, for Anthropocene geography, since this discourse is normally debated very much in the clear-cut dichotomies between areas that somehow did conquer the world and other areas that were conquered. I think it's interesting to understand this Central European geography as an area that really has experiences with both sides, and this also would hold, let's say, for the uranium mines in Eastern Germany, a small number of years after Germany tried to conquer the whole world. This area was really treated like a colony by Soviet uranium projects, and this somehow also connects this area here to this experience. Then what is interesting is how do state structures and let's say political structures interfere with this resource. Interestingly, the Austrian case after the Soviets gave back these oil fields is in fact really something like a success story because of this particular structure of a state-owned oil industry. So we don't have oligarchs or big oil companies here, but really something like the Austrian welfare state really profited a lot from these resources. And why? Because it was this social democrat Catholic shared this somehow between red and black party, just a something like a post-war success story of political restructuring the state, of course, with the experience of being very much part also of the Nazi history on the let's say on the wrong side of history, and then feeling also also having the experience of being part of this how do you call that of the Soviet occupation. So I think what we have here present is we very much have the geological structure really present in what was and what is political and economical histories of this area here. So it's really something like I would say a very prominent showcase how to connect political, cultural, and geological histories here. And among the layers that are intertwined into this particular petromodernity and Anthropocene is, of course, political history and economic history, also building up of quite big scientific and political institutions. Of course, we have experiences with ecological disasters, and but overall in this area, the story is still remembered as, let's say, the golden age of post-war welfare state. And of course, we have individual histories of families, of companies, and what I call body politics and imaginaries and desire economies. I come to in just a minute. And if you compare this area here with other areas that we write about in our atlas, I think it's interesting to compare this here with really the situation in Baku, because it's an old history, and in Baku what we learned from one of our authors who also published in the exhibition catalog, Leila Alieva, who's a political scientist living in Oxford since she was expelled from her home country, Azerbaijan. She writes very much about the different experiences in Tsaristic Russia, then in Soviet Russia, and now in oligarch Azerbaijanian Baku, where nothing really is invested into a sustainable economy, but it's only the presidential family that profits from these. Also here we have at the one spot very different experiences. Of course, the situation is connected to what I have here symbolized for these northern German oil fields, because it's of course it's areas with little oil, with this particular German context, and also with this connection of the oil being very much connected to the questions, of course, of Nazi war economy and all types of how to deal with this burden of history. But I would also say that the history here is somehow a little bit of a parallel story as of the Norwegian case, which is, of course, always the master narrative for something like a oil-powered welfare state. And I don't see too many other countries where really this really worked in the 60s and 70s to really put oil revenues not into just the pockets of some companies, but really into investing into the state. So I want to close with two aspects of Anthropocene, thinking here with the and how to understand geological structures and how to build up institutions. And I think the local history here of these oil fields contributed very much to building up institutions. Like, for example, Montan University based at Leoben, which is actually one of, there's not many fields where Austrian universities are really among the top 10 of universities in the world, but Montan University is among the top 10 of mountain and mining universities, and this, of course, has to do with these local structures. Here, of course, we have the OPEC, which sits here in the city, and this is a very nice picture. This was a commemoration of 80 or 75 years of one of the oldest oil pumps here in the north of Lower Austria at Geiselberg. And it was really the OPEC General Secretary who visited this celebration from a very small scale Austrian company. Then, of course, we have Geosphere Austria. It was formerly called Geologische Bundesanstalt, which is also the leading state institution here to document all those things. Then we have quite interesting companies, and I would think of that as something like a geology, something like a geological landscape that really only came into place because of this type of local oil industry. On the bottom right, we have excavation sites here at Karlsplatz, and I don't know if you know, there was in these big Anthropocene initiatives, and in the Anthropocene working group, there was also a Viennese member of this Anthropocene working group, and they tried to put the so-called golden spike of this of the Anthropocene to Vienna, because they also could detect the start of the new geological era here, really at the city of Vienna. Next thing is what I would address as these body politics. Of course, we have here a lot of literature that deals with this very male branch of petromodernity. We have here celebrating books, Männer im Erdöl, Man and Petroleum, Man Drilling, and so on and so on. But if you look closer, then it's only half of the story. Of course, in the field and in these villages, the modernization did not only go to let's say petro-masculinity. It really was quite a successful modernization and liberation of this area. And I also have here this little picture of Margarete Ottillinge there in this very strange, ambivalent position there of being very deeply conservative, but still head of a oil company, and she was addressed as the only guy in the company was this lady. So this is what I would make of a particular post-war Austrian gender heteromodernity. But the whole story is, of course, it's now very difficult and you almost need archaeological means to go into these stories. When you see this pond there, nobody would think that this is the document of an Anthropocene process and drilling sites and huge ecological disasters, plus also interesting memories of local use. So it takes quite some grassroots work and some digging, and you really need to get into these stories to really explain what type of Anthropocene is present in these fields there. And this is the end. Thanks.
What happened there? What was the disaster? The pond.
The disaster. Well, I mean, it was an explosion. It was for months. The site was burning. It was like in the gas simply exploded and was burning over months. So the whole structure, the whole drilling structure, then was lost. It is still in the ground. So the technology, it was an American, Soviets used there an American drilling derrick, and the whole thing just sunk into the ground, and it was impossible, of course, well, they just needed to wait when the fire was gone. And there was in the 50s, there were, I think, maybe 10 of these disasters. So it was really, if you would go here to Kahlenberg, you easily would see these 200 meters of flame, just 30 kilometers of the thing. It was really like what we know from Iraq or so. So it was really, and interestingly, these stories are completely forgotten. I mean, people now think, well, the oil is somewhere in the Middle East or in, I don't know, Siberia, but the experience that it was so close, and it was really part of also of local risk management. And then to see that just some years later, this was something like a fabulous place with blue water. And if you talk to these people sitting there with their bikes and their wine bottles, it was really like an interesting place again. So this is, I think, a nice example of what we in cultural theory think of as living on a wounded planet. So actually there the planet was wounded, and now people would completely freak out, but people just continued with living in this wounded area. That's why I think this is interesting to go into these very local stories, to connect them with experiences that you normally would think of as a very exotic, or so, because we don't have this industry that close and that close to where we are.
And that pond, where is it?
It's
That you mentioned.
Yeah, this is this particular pond is between. I can show you on the map. It's this is really the. I think it's easier to show it here. So this is Vienna. If you take the S-Bahn to Gensendorf, this brings you here. Here's Gensendorf, and the pond is between Gensandorf and Brottes, so it must be something like here. There we have some of these ponds. We also have some craters up there because also other explosions happened here, and it's in the vicinity of this really. It's definitely the biggest oil field by far in Central Europe, and that's why it was so interesting to really drill this field very quickly, and whatever the cost may be, of course, and the cost were these ecological disasters.
So largely this oil and gas fields, they were depleted.
No, they're still active.
Yeah, you said there is 10% now.
Ye-
So, but like the volumes went down because of natural depletion, or because of like whatever oil from Middle East or from Siberia is cheaper. What?
No, I mean it is if you go to one of these reports there at Geologische Bundesanstalt,
Mhm.
one of these reports there, they explain you exactly how clever they try to drill the next two small things there to make still as much as before.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it gets very difficult.
Overall, all the production, like in the previous slide,
Yeah,
like yeah, so the production goes down.
of
down,
course.
down. Why?
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, it's depleted. Okay. I mean,
It's
everything
physically depleted.
everything has an end. I mean, this is
No, it
interesting.
doesn't happen in Siberia or doesn't happen in Middle East. It just happens for some special geological reasons, right? Or,
Oh no! I mean,
Yeah.
it simply there was simply more. There is more in the beginning there. That's why it's not
yeah.
depleted. I mean, interestingly, these fields here are already exploited for a very long time. And for example, this one particular oil well, Geiselberg 1, is producing now, I think, for 75 years, which is really it's completely unusual. And this is also interesting because these very small fields there require quite some skills how to manage them. And I think it's interesting that you have these skills there in these companies. You have these skills there at this particular mountain university. And if you just go to the Middle East or to some other places like in Nigeria or so, companies have no interest to somehow properly produce over a long period of time. Here, interesting, these companies have this interest. And if you go to these meetings, it's really interesting how how skillful they talk about their particular terroir.
Micromanaging the.
Yeah.
Questions, guys? Yeah, please.
You mentioned this Catholic petromodernity.
Yeah.
But you sort of you placed it in a well, historical perspective, but it didn't really finish with the it was not limited in time, or was it?
Yeah. Okay.
Was there a continuation?
Yes. Well, you're right. This is how I put these slides together. I mean, interestingly, now these St. Barbara services are, of course, not at all as popular as they were in the 60s and 70s. It somehow finished because the overall rural structure there and the structure in these villages was somehow underwent the change that every village underwent. So you don't have really the milieus of this local Catholicism anymore. Plus, it was very much connected to this particular moment there, where from the heads of the company and from a very charismatic local priest, this tradition was somehow founded to connect the local, let's say, spiritual village structures with the new workers from outside. This was actually this is not possible this is possible at one historic moment. You can do this mixing of let's say more communist workers and more Catholic villagers. There are simply not so many workers there anymore. So many things are automized. The villages are simply commuter villages because the car has taken everything over. That's why this is something like a mythical remembering. So the story is somehow over. I didn't really put an end to it in the dates, because of course this somehow goes on. You have still people retelling the story and so on and so on, but the interesting time period is over.
I see.
It switched into the refining industry. There's huge refineries, like in Svechat, like when you go to the airport, you see this monstrous installation.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
Which
this
is
is
all about
yeah.
processing oil and gas into
It's
something
about
else.
gas, Schwechat.
Huh?
In Schwechat, it's gas.
It's
gas,
gold.
yeah.
It's
So it's
gold.
basically like, and it's mostly Russian gas, because like if 10% could be local, but 90% comes from Russia, and nowadays from America as well.
Yeah, this is
But basically,
it's
it's an entirely different industry because it needs lots of highly qualified labor, engineers, chemists,
a different.
and this is where this Catholic background
Yeah.
would actually come into.
Yeah, of course. You're right. I didn't really talk about the refinery. It's a little bit of a different story. Actually, in the, let's say, in the political ecology of the company, the refinery was more socialist and the drilling units were more ÖVP. So it was a little bit balanced like this, but the workforce for the refinery, of course, came also from the same area. Actually, at the refinery, you don't need too much workforce. I just learned that it's somehow like 20 people on screens that somehow manage the
But
process.
now it's so much automated only now.
No, yes, yeah. But the backstory of the refinery in Schwechat is interesting because you had something like 5 refineries in Vienna. So you had one in Floridsdorf, one in Kagran, one in Vösendorf, and the backstory of these refineries is, of course, this Galician oil. And they put the refineries next to the railroads where the Galician oil could roll into Vienna, and next to the Danube, where the Romanian oil could come just by boat. So they already had the refineries in place before they drilled really the Lower Austrian oil. So it's a little bit. I could have included this also into this, and it's a little bit of a different story, but of course this also belongs to the ecology of the place here.
Beauty of oil.
There's also this mysticism about this refinery, because close to it there is this cemetery of the nameless. It is quite close, to the refinery. It's on when the river was making a turn, there was a place where all the people who decided to commit suicide or who were killed and the bodies were thrown into the Danube, they would, at this point of the river, they would
come back to the shore.
to go to shore. Well, as dead bodies, of course, and because the Catholic Church would not be able to recognize whether those people committed suicide, and that would be a sin. So they built for all those people who ended up there close to Schwechat, who ended up dead, and they built a special cemetery of the people without names, namenlos, nameless.
If we really decide to make a little tour of some of these sites, we definitely should not only drive to the oil fields, but also take a small tour through the refinery, because you can actually cross the refinery by by car, and it's really a huge refinery. And it's really interesting to see that this huge structure is needed to crack down those fossil molecules. So if it would be easier, people would make it easier. It's not easy. It needs this massive technospheric structure to somehow manage what is in these molecules. And you, of course, you're right. The oil doesn't come from these local oil fields. A lot comes, of course, came from Russia, but the main pipeline for the Schwechat refinery, I think, was from Trieste. So it was then
From Libyan.
Yeah, so the everything what comes to Trieste.
So there is a pipeline from Trieste to.
Yes, there's two pipelines. One pipeline from Trieste goes to Germany, to Bavaria, to Ingolstadt. We also have very nice pictures in our collection with how this pipeline is built, and another branch then goes from Carinthia to Vienna. So it's you have there this interesting structure that the pipelines somehow were the new rivers. So since the Danube wasn't the way how to ship the oil to Vienna, they needed to build up this new river, this new pipeline river to get the oil here.
They shipped from Romania, right?
Classically, yes.
But not from
Yes.
From Trieste.
Yes.
For Libyan oil.
John, question.
Yeah. Go on.
Yes, thank you. Okay, now you see me. Thank you. After Anton's question, that was so depressing, I have a very flat question to ask. Thank you so much for this talk. It was
I switched off.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Stupid music that we
It was on our side.
okay. You don't really have to
Yeah.
see my face. I'm so jet lagged and I have a cold, so it's not not as beautiful as oil today. I had a question about. Do you hear me?
Turn up volume.
Yeah. Now I can. I just wanted to kill the. Okay. Yeah. Joanna, can you?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I have a question about Mountain University.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so that's fascinating to see how technological knowledge is created in these spaces where are very connected to the extraction. And I was wondering if, because now they're presenting themselves as the leaders in sustainable technologies and green energy. So I'm wondering if you think that this specific case of knowledge creation in a context where you had depletion of the resource for which knowledge was developed, was it specific in the way that then this kind of university could produce green knowledge, if I can summarize it like this? Or I'm sorry if my question is not so clear, but just because in the back of my mind, I'm wondering when I see this kind of publicity for a university that has been,
Of course.
the top university for mining since the 19th century, spontaneously we can think this is greenwashing, but then maybe not, maybe it's more than that. So I want to hear your thoughts about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is really a good question, because I mean, of course, this is something like a top 10 mining university. It is also was classically considered in the Austrian academic landscape as a very, very conservative, if not a right-wing university in last decades. And now it's really very interesting that this very conservative institution turns itself now into something like a player in many, let's say, progressive fields of the energy transition. And since, well, I mean, you're somehow right that it's a little bit makes us suspicious if we see this rebranding. But if you talk to the people there, and I ended up with in some cooperations with people with the chair, for example, for reservoir engineering, these are really decent people, and it's really interesting, and they really take their mission serious, and it's really interesting. I mean, I don't want to judge everything there, and I think it's interesting to see how this type of institution in new circumstances really uses, let's say, knowledge from a technological period that needs to be over to create the next period. Because of course, for all other geothermic energy and so on, you of course need a lot of geological knowledge, and of course you have these geologists at place. You also have this type of chemists, and you really need to take, I would say, the bull at their horns and change their path. And I think what I learned from the people really in Leoben and talking to these colleagues there, it's really an institution in transition. And of course, everyone needs to be a little bit. We need to be critical about if this is only greenwashing or what type of knowledge is produced there in the future. But it is definitely a place in transition. And
well, in Paris, this school of miners, which was created by Napoleon, has turned into a major school, Center of Social Sciences. And Bruno Latour was teaching there for decades.
We're still waiting for the Leoben Latour, of course, but it's
okay. Good luck to them. But another analogy is the University of Gas and Oil in Ivano-Frankivsk. Because that's a similar story that major university was created actually in, I think, the Polish times, not in Austrian times, for serving the local oil and gas fields. But then oil and gas were depleted. No local applications for their knowledge anymore. But in the Soviet times, they trained people to go to Siberia or to the Caucasus. And so that was the major training university for the Soviet oil fields very far away. But nowadays, of course, what they are doing, I interviewed people there, but that was before the war. And they were not really interested in anything but oil and gas. Because nowadays they're doing something.
But I think the question was really good, because it really leads us to what type of let's say institutions are interesting as historians of science or as let's say cultural philosophers. And of course we need to address this type of technological knowledge. And if we only talk, let's say, to ecological activists, we don't get the knowledge from within this type of technosphere. And so for our work, it's really important to show our agenda, and to, of course, we are very critical towards petrocapitalism or so, but we are still very, very curious and to learn from the people really in these technological fields. And I think this really lacks in a lot of approaches to petro-modernity and to petroculture, that the simple conversation between people in something like the industries or in something like a mining university and people from the cultural field is simply impossible. We had, for example, in Wolfsburg, when we were preparing the exhibition Beauty and Oil in Wolfsburg Kunstmuseum, we had a workshop, and we invited really the top people from the US, and then we visited a local also world-leading company in putting electronics into drill heads and so on, because in northern Germany you also have some local niches of high-end technology. And for most of our guests from the US, people who were working over decades in petrocultures research, this was the first time they visited a real company. And it's really interesting, I think, to not lose contact to this type of knowledge. And in particular, for if we want to know about the Anthropocene as something like a shared space between Earth system scientists and cultural philosophers, we still need to be able to talk to people who understand the Earth system.
More question, please.
Yeah,
Please.
actually, thank you for your presentation. The angle I want to ask question is when you are comparing the incident of oil companies here in Austria compared to Nigeria, I was just thinking that is it not because here most of if oil company has opportunity to work here, that they will like to obey the regulations and law relating to environmental protection compared to other parts of the world, maybe in third world countries, which some people call global south, where they can just go and do anything. And here, so far they are able to work within the law, then they will be able to operate for a long period of time. But there, they would prefer to do it very short, within short period of time, and do whatsoever they like, pollute the environment, do and go out of the system. And nobody has, I don't know, how should I put it, has the benefits to sue them. Because the petrol companies are like superpower that they have a lot of resources, even more than some countries in the South.
Predatory practices.
I think I'm just thinking that way. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, in the discourse, you have this type. You have the concept of the oil curse that for actually most of the parts of the world, it is a very, very bad thing if oil is in your ground because it attracts the wrong people and the wealth is simply exported and the ecological costs are there on the ground. And of course, Nigeria is maybe we have we have one article in the book, and we have also a contribution by a Nigerian scholar in this catalog in the big.
This one?
No, in the big book.
This one, yes, I saw the
and
I know
the case there is really is something like of course foreign oil companies play a very, very bad role. It's also what we learned from the author of this article. It's also the ethnical structures there, that the elites come from the north and the oil is in the south. But you're completely right. The legal structure is very important, and this is also what we learned from our colleague from Baku, that if you start with the oil production in, let's say, with a weak state, with no legal structure, then you definitely won't profit from this resource. And what is so interesting here, let's say in Austria or also in this Norwegian case, that they established a strong state that has some authority against this type of companies, and so that the ecological cost is put into the calculation, and you simply can't. You cannot do everything.
But still, they explode, as you said.
Yes, but of course, for way higher standards. I mean, the
standards are higher, definitely, but still, think stuff happens.
Yes, but I would say, since this company is really rooted in this type of area there, and they're very well received on the ground there, of course they would never behave like with their drillings in Libya or in.
That's a different world.
And this is really, and that's why I think it's interesting if you have this experience here in the local field, and that's why also I must say I find it a little bit dishonest by ecological activists to just, well, when in the let's say some 15 years ago, when the project there was to drill or not to drill for this shale gas, and of course the standards would have been way higher here, and it would be, if you like to burn natural gas, then I think it's a better thing to produce it here among higher standards than to just import it from Siberia with all those methane leakages, or to import it from other parts in the world. So I think it's this not in my backyard attitude is if you still burn things from other people's backyards, then I think it's a little bit critical to.
There is something like that's quite a unique historical experience in Central Europe about this large depleting oil and gas fields, because it doesn't. So it happened in Romania, happened in Austria, happened in Ukraine, in Galicia. It doesn't happen anywhere else, like in Texas, in Nigeria, in Siberia, in Saudi Arabia. It doesn't happen. I mean, there are local depletions. There are new technologies, but they still are pumping oil and gas in bigger and bigger amounts. But while in Austria and Romania, they just cannot. Whatever they do, they cannot produce. So it's an actual phenomenon of, it's kind of an example for humanity. This unique and massive depletion of a natural resource.
Yeah, but what do you really think that? I mean, also Siberian fields also deplete. I mean,
there's so many talks about that, but they produce more and more. They will produce.
Yeah, because the fields are so big. But
and technologies, they import new technologies, whatever. But of course, these technologies are available here, say in Austria, but they don't work.
Yeah, I mean, if they would have gone for these shale gas formations, they also could produce. I mean, the estimated amount of natural gas was, in the most optimistic scenarios, was something like 30 years of the entire natural gas consumption. I mean,
yeah, but they would destroy the ski resorts that have been closed anyway. So
let's cut it down to So let's cut it down to 10 years. It still would be it would be still a lot. I don't know.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, and maybe we really find. Next time, maybe I mean, if we are such a small group, we could go with my car. But maybe find time for this discussion.
Yeah, let's keep thinking about that. Okay. There was some very kind of light receptionist.
Thank you.
Like I said.
Thank you. Enjoyed the reception.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.